Good morning, everyone. It is a hot yet lovely Sunday here in Chicago, and I am happy to do another episode with my amazing co host, Coach Ange, for a little perspective, season three. We are super stoked to have an incredible guest with us today to talk about access and more and advocacy and making sure that people with disabilities that their voices are heard. So I'm going to turn it over to Angela to introduce our guest for today. How are you, Ange?
I'm good. I don't know what hot is to you up there, but today on the coast of Mississippi is perfect.
Wish.
Perfect. It is sunny. It is not hot for us. And I'm loving it. I'm also really loving this episode. This is seriously such an exciting episode. Samyukta and I have been texting each other about how excited we are for this episode. And it's not just exciting because our guest has a ton of knowledge and experience and is going to be able to talk about some things that we've not really been able to cover on this show before. But I also have a very personal connection with Dr. Scott Crawford. My sister, Cindy Singletary, who passed away in 2019, was a huge advocate. She was a wheelchair user, very obviously physically disabled, but in no way mentally or intellectually disabled. And she used that intellect and fight and fire to fight for others. She was an advocate in the school system. She would go with parents to IEP meetings to ensure the public schools were doing what they're supposed to do. So parents out there, if your kids have any kind of needs, there are advocates that will go and help you get your children's needs met in the public schools, because there are laws that are surrounded by that. And she's made huge differences in my own life for my kids, her nieces and nephews, but also so many others. People still tell me, "You're Cindy's sister. I don't know what I would have done without her." And her and Scott did so much. They were in the trenches together for this state of ours. I have a love. I don't even want to say hate, but it's a complicated relationship with Mississippi. I grew up here, and we don't always do things right, but I feel like somebody's got to make it right. And Dr. Scott Crawford is doing exactly that. And so thank you so much for being on the show. I know you're super busy and you're always speaking and all over the place. So Scott, tell us just a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. Anyway, my name is Scott Crawford. I live with multiple sclerosis, a progressive form of the disease. I was a young, healthy neuropsychologist. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I graduated with that degree in 1995, and I was practicing in Miami, and I came down with MS, and it affects my voice. I'm a wheelchair user. I have a lot of spasms, and I use a hand splint on both hands often to keep my hands open. But anyway, I use a power wheelchair for mobility. I no longer drive because of the spasms. It wouldn't be safe. So since 1999, I've been living with this disease. It's been 24 years now. It ended my career, which was a huge loss. But, I had to grieve that loss and had to recreate a life, a new one with meaning. And so my life is about service to others. It always was, but I can't serve in the way I did as a psychologist. So I serve as a human rights advocate with particular focus on people with disabilities, because that's what I know. Anyway, so a little bit about me. I'm a space nerd. I love Star Trek, Star Wars, all things science fiction. And anyway, I live alone here in Jackson, Mississippi with my two kitties, Maggie and Misty, and they're the light of my life. They keep my spirits up And as you probably know, for many years, a decade, I presented a brick display done all in Legos that was modeled after our hometown of Jackson, Mississippi. And a lot of those buildings were custom built by myself to look exactly like the real thing. And so that was a joy that I had for about a decade. And so anyway, that's a little bit about me.
That's so cool. You're also a professional photographer. And you sent me some photos of my sister today, and I'm so grateful that you use that skill to help capture those things, because it means a lot to me personally, but I also look forward to being able to use those in my own advocacy, because it's important. Photographs really are news, or not news, but a tool that we can use. So
Right, it's been invaluable. I use whatever skills you have, whatever abilities you have to make a difference. And everybody's got a different set. I learned how to shoot photography when I was in college. I was the darkroom manager for Millsaps, and I'm dating myself because we actually had darkrooms back then. But anyway, that was a passion of mine, and it's still a passion of mine. And I show up to lots of rallies and human rights events and try to help record them.
That's wonderful. So rallies and events are obviously a big part of what I got to see you and Cindy do. But I think one of my favorite things that you've done is your battle with the courthouse. So I would love to hear you just share a little bit about that. What led you to take it on, and then how it felt afterwards, and all the in between.
Yeah. Well, you've heard the adage, if you see something, say something.
Love it.
And that's one of my mantras. If I see a problem and it doesn't just affect one person, I may be the person affected today, but I'm surely not the only wheelchair user in Hinds County. I'm not the only person with mobility impairment in Hinds County. So when I noticed that our circuit courthouse was not accessible to people with mobility impairments, I had to say something. And as I always do, I always start informally and politely.
Yeah.
It's really important whenever you're doing advocacy is start politely, follow all the relevant protocols. If you see a problem in your local jurisdiction, they should have an ADA coordinator. If they have more than 50 employees, and that includes police and firefighters, by the way. So a lot of towns should have an ADA coordinator, just saying. So if you see a problem, start with the building manager, point out the problem and try to educate them politely, and hopefully that will work. It often doesn't, but you still have to try, because it builds relationships, and down the road it will matter. So anyway, I noticed that the courtrooms were not accessible. They had a step leading up to the bar, which meant basically if you're a wheelchair user or you can't climb a step or steps, you are not getting into that jury box. And I was being called for jury duty roughly every 2.5 years or so. It was so every 2.5 years I would get called for jury duty. Every 2.5 years I would dutifully show up and have to point out again that their courthouse isn't accessible to people that use wheelchairs. Eventually it got embarrassing. And so I did. I had meetings with the clerk, people at the courthouse, their ADA coordinator. And, we were promised that it would be fixed, but years and years went by and it wasn't. So, after I had a final friendly conversation with their ADA coordinator, I said, enough's enough. Time's up. It's been like 5 years and nothing's been done. So I hired a lawyer and we filed suit. That was 2017. And we tried to negotiate a settlement consent decree. That didn't work. So eventually we went to trial. I think that was 2019. Yeah. So anyway, that trial was brutal.
Yeah.
Lawsuits are the last resort, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not for the faint-hearted. I don't recommend them. And believe me, I tried everything else. I really do. This is not a lot of fun. I'm just saying, it is not any fun at all. Because the person who's complaining often feels like they're put on trial. I sure did.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, in 2019, we went to trial. The outcome of the trial was, get this, we lost. We lost. Why? Because the court held at that time that I didn't have standing, which is kind of ironic. Kind of ironic. I'm a wheelchair user. Standing.
Wait. My gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, they basically said that I had no intention of ever going back to the courthouse, even though I had documented time and time again that I would show up every
Jury duty.
2.5 years or so, at their behest. I was subpoenaed, like everybody gets subpoenaed, registered voters. So anyway, so we literally had to take it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And wow, never in my wildest nightmare did I imagine the dude in the wheelchair who shows up every 2.5 years be ruled not having standing to sue for such an obvious thing.
Yeah.
But so anyway, we went before a 3-judge panel. When was that? I think it was 2021. I don't remember. But I went to New Orleans. Sadly, I was not able to even attend the hearing because it was during the pandemic. I was vaccinated. I told them I was vaccinated, but it didn't matter. And they wouldn't let me see the proceeding. So I waited outside and listened on the internet. But long story short, we won the appeal. Thankfully, I was ruled to have standing, and it went back to the judge here, the federal judge, and we negotiated a consent decree. That consent decree called for them to make several of the courtrooms accessible to provide program access under Section 504, program access. Not all the courtrooms, but some of them. And, an accessible restroom on several of the floors so that people of all abilities can use the bathroom. Obvious things like that. Jury jury rooms that are accessible to people of all abilities, et cetera, et cetera. Those sorts of things. The deadline for compliance was last month, April. They did nothing.
What?
Yep.
And oh my God.
They did nothing. They have an excuse. They say they're being audited, but I don't
Stop
see
it.
What does that
Stop
even mean?
it. Stop.
That's not no.
Uh-uh.
Wait, not even
I've
one
heard
room?
that.
Are
We've
there?
heard that excuse before.
Have we now?
They couldn't even make one room. I'm asking, like, we're asking for basic. Like, we're like
Oh
pulling
my
at straws here.
gosh.
Not even one room.
Audited.
Nothing.
Like,
So, you know, they had years, you know, I mean, I think this started in 2013, I think, maybe 2012. I don't quite remember, but it's been a decade. This is not
wow.
this is not a recent event.
Ah.
You know, I informed them way back in 2012, I think. Yeah. So anyway, bottom line is, the lawyers are going to have to take it back to court.
I mean, are there any repercussions? And if so, like who, you know, because what?
Yeah, what? Exactly.
You take it to the next level too, like, because this is a building, this is a state.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around
That's
digging your heels in and just refusing such obvious accommodations. I can't. Why? Like, just do it. Just be a good leader and just do what's best for your citizens. Like, I can't comprehend it.
Neither can I.
Ah,
Neither can I. I don't know where this didn't just end with a conversation. Polite
exactly.
request. I'm always polite. I don't
Yeah,
like confrontations,
yeah.
but being polite has rarely worked.
I mean, it doesn't. And you know, Cindy, she wore the badge of being a bitch as an honor because she had to. You know, her physical appearance made people feel like they could just do or say whatever, but you know, she certainly let them know that that wasn't the case. But it's not that she wanted to have to go take that route, though. You know, like you said, that's exhausting. It's mentally and physically exhausting to have to fight for just your basic rights. You know, we're such a pro-life state, but we're never pro-living. You know, it's making me madder and madder. Like, it really, as time goes on, it really is how it's almost like they're trying to keep us from living. So it's not just not pro-living, but it's almost anti-living unless you look and fit a certain mold. And it's exhausting being disabled. Just living our life is exhausting. And then having to fight is another layer. You know, when I go to Walmart, on the rare occasion I go to Walmart, I usually am reminded why I gladly pay for delivery, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting having to, hey, hi, why are you so, because that's the way God made me. I'm just trying to get my daggum groceries, you know, just please, just, can I? You know, and that's just like, that's a simple thing, right? But then the actual rights to a bathroom and to have a jury of my peers in the courthouse. A jury of my peers means that somebody looks like me in some way. You know, it may not be a little person, but it's somebody with a disability so they can understand my perspective. But that's not even an option. Like, I don't have a question. I'm just ranting at this point.
What you raise a really good point, Angela, a really good point. We, people with disabilities, are 1 in 3 Mississippians. 1 in 3. Let that sink in.
That's
1 in 3 Mississippians, adult Mississippians, have a disability of some kind, mental or physical, and or both,
Yeah.
or sensory,
Yeah.
all the above.
Yeah.
But so if we're going to have juries of our peers,
Yeah.
then it stands to reason that courthouse had better be accessible to people of all abilities.
Right. Whew.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we could probably rant on that forever. But I'll let Samyukta, if you have a question about it, I'll let you ask a question or whatever before we move on to the next
No,
topic.
I'm just still processing. I'm just still thinking how long it's taking, and just to get like the basic amenities, and like you said, y- like because it's so baked, because it's so embedded, like the structure of like ableism and like racism and like everything is so baked in society. It's so embedded. And I was on a webinar talking about ethics and accessibility and how it's so tied in, because it's so you having accessible spaces in all levels is the right thing to do. It's a must have, it's essential, it's ethical, and it's about just making sure everyone has access to your space, and not just going up to the ramp, not just like getting in the building. It's about including them, but and lifting them and including and considering their opinions and voices and elevating them. So, but now we're just trying to get you in the door here, and it's still like a problem, and it's still like it makes you angry. So I like you said, because when you bring up these things, when you bring up these points, it's all, and the people make the excuses that, oh, it's just you don't think about these things. Oh, I never thought about that. And honestly, I get annoyed now. I get annoyed when people say that, because it's so, because of the structure, because of this how society is built. Like you said, Angela, it's built for one type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to start thinking, in order to be a good leader, in order to be like, you have to, it's a mindset that
Right.
you need to change. It's a lot of unlearning you have to do. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of self-awareness you have to um develop, and a huge transformation. And it's
Yeah.
sad because of it's taking this long to do. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents for, but I,
Yeah.
yeah.
And something you said made me think, it's hard for us who aren't a certain type of person to have confidence in society, because we're told that we're this, we're that, we're not good enough. So, and in order to be an activist, an advocate, especially one as active as, Dr. Scott is, or as Cindy was, like, you have to dig real deep to know who you are and really have that confidence to be able to then help others in turn. And, you know, I do DEIB training, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And when I do it, I do this little game where when the people come in the room, they get a card and it has an ingredient on it. And ideally, if it's a big crowd, there's duplicates. And what I say is, you were given a card, go find, go make gumbo. And so they go and they find, the flour, the grease, this, that, and we get together. They make their gumbo groups, and then I'll take the flour out of the gumbo, and I'll say, would you buy that gumbo? Do you want to be a part of that gumbo? And they're like, no, it's not gumbo. And I'm like, exactly. So corporate wise, personal wise, whenever decisions are being made, don't you want gumbo? Like, again, it just is so obvious to me. I just cannot understand. But on a similar note, you have recently, well, you always do, but really recently been talking a lot about the bus situation in Jackson. And when you introduced yourself, you spoke of how your spasms prevent you from driving. And so obviously you heavily rely on public transportation. Now, my sister was lucky that she had my mom, so she didn't have to worry about that on the coast often. But there were times where she did, and when we had to use the buses, it wasn't always easy. She was friendly with the CTA director, so that helps. But not everybody is. And so, and our bus system is just like up and down 90, and that's about it. But you live in the capital of our state, so of all, you know, it's the biggest and best city supposedly. So to me, you know, they should have a very inclusive transportation system. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about your experiences with that, and what, you know, what's going on there, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, we have to go back in time to when I returned to Jackson. See, I'm from Mississippi originally, but it's complicated. I lived a lot of places, but Mississippi is home. Okay, Mississippi's home. So when I got seriously, significantly disabled, I eventually returned home to Jackson, and that was December 2006. And again, I cannot drive. I should not drive. It would not be safe, and I'm very conscientious about that. So I started to try to ride JTran, which is our local public transit provider. And I found that many of our older buses, and we had a lot of older buses, had lifts that were non-functional. They didn't work. So they couldn't pick me up. They couldn't pick up anybody in a wheelchair, ever. So I was being left on the side of the road, literally day in and day out. And of course, you know, as per protocol, I stay polite. I, you know, ask for backup transportation. That would arrive hours later, and I was overheated. You know, MS makes you very heat sensitive. So it was not easy to be stuck in 95-degree heat.
Mississippi heat.
Yeah, I mean, high humidity.
High humidity. Sweltering.
Right. So anyway, I tried all the, you know, the informal requests and stuff like that. And eventually I had to go and educate myself about the ADA and what the law says. And finally, I had to call FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and say, hey, this is a problem here. And, you know, they didn't know me back then. This was 2007. It was the summer of 2007. They didn't know me. And, you know, they gave me the usual protocol, which was, well, Dr. Crawford, you know, we can't really do anything unless there's a pattern and practice of discrimination. And you know, I politely try, you know, I try to stay patient, but it's hard. It's hard. But I was like, but ma'am, sir, I wouldn't be calling you if this was a one-off.
Right.
You know, I don't escalate things to the FTA idly. You know, Angela Semiyukta, you know this better than anyone. Presume competence. Whenever you're working with someone with a disability, presume competence.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, of course, this is not a one-off. Do you think I would go through all this trouble? And then they would say, well, gee, Dr. Crawford, we'll have to have proof because we can't come down there and inspect the system because we don't have the budget. Well, that was disappointing, but it also made me mad.
So would the buses wouldn't have like record of needing to come and get you 2 hours after, they wouldn't have that proof?
No,
What?
no, because they're just, you're it.
Yeah.
You, the advocate, have to
Yeah.
prove your case. And sadly, that's a heavy lift, right? So I've got my Nikon camera and I'm like, okay, you asked for it. So I'm like, I'm on the side of the road with my, I call her Big Bertha because
I
she's
call
big.
my Big Bertha.
Huh?
I call my camera Big Bertha.
Really? Well, I've got this big ass camera that weighs a ton. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
She was also known as my fourth child.
I know, because got you.
So Scott's here holding this gigantic thing, except it's a Nikon.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm
funny.
like, you must stay polite at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Do not hand them ammunition,
anything
to use against you, because they will.
No power.
Never lose your
Yeah.
temper, even if you want to. Now, so how do you cope? Well, you talk to your friends offline, right? You call Angela or Samyuktha and you vent, right? Okay, that's how you survive this. Just saying. But anyway, I started filing detailed reports with photographs describing dates, times, with date and timestamp on the photograph. Okay? It was incontrovertible. This was back in 2007, and I was duplicating this and printing it out back then, and sending it to them in duplicate via, US mail with return receipt requested. That's a lot of work.
A lot.
So eventually I got their attention at FTA, but even that was not enough. Until one day I called the JTran general manager and I said, gee, sir, I need to go to North Park Mall, which requires 2 buses to work consecutively. That almost never happened back then, almost never. But I gave them fair warning. I said, sir, I need to get to North Park. And can you guarantee that I'm going to get there today and back? And this was a phone conversation with the general manager of JTran. And he said, yes, sir. So I did it. And sure enough, I got there, but about 5 o'clock, 4:45, something like that. This was December. It was getting dark already. And sure enough, 3 different buses came by and 3 different lifts failed. They shut the system down, knowing I was on the side of the road. I had called, yes. Yes, I called. Yes, I called. I left message after message. And then I called the city of Jackson and left messages there. Yeah. So by 9:30 at night, I'd been on the side of the road for, I don't remember how many hours. The Ridgeland police loaded up my chair in the back of a pickup truck, and were kind enough to get me home, but I was in bad shape.
Yeah.
Mentally, emotionally, physically, everything.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
So that was the last straw. That was the last straw. And at that point, you know, I went to Disability Rights Mississippi and I said, we need to sue because it's not getting better and nothing we've tried is working. And so we did. In 2008, we sued. The Department of Justice by then knew me.
Good.
Because FTA had shared my copious documentation of like 13 complaints with photographs showing the pattern in practice. So it was undeniable. I literally had to prove the pattern in practice on my own. So finally, DOJ joined the lawsuit. Attorney David Knight, bless him. He's wonderful. He's a public servant of the highest caliber. And he still works at DOJ. And he's still overseeing this after 15 years. Bless him. He's great. So anyway, Disability Rights Mississippi sued on our behalf. We had a number of plaintiffs. And the consent decree is still in effect. It's due to end in June. Are we there yet? Well, I can say with some satisfaction that the fixed route system now welcomes people that use wheelchairs.
Wow.
And it is, to my knowledge, it is spot on perfect, to my knowledge.
Wow.
I get on a bus now, and I'm usually not the only wheelchair user.
You don't say.
Yeah.
Wow, 1 in 3 Mississippians are disabled, and you're not the only wheelchair user on the bus in our capital. Oh,
because you're the only one experiencing discrimination in the whole state. That's not their problem.
So anyway, the good news is that when I get on a bus now, there's usually already a person using one of the wheelchair securement locations. So that's good. That's integration. That's what ADA calls for.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Integration. Using the same bus, going to the same places with everybody else. Okay, so that's great. What's not so great is the paratransit system, which, as you know, is a separate system for people who, because of their disability, are unable to independently use the fixed route system. Independently use the fixed route system. The on-time performance of our paratransit system is still woefully inadequate. It's about
always late.
Your chances of being on time to your appointment if you use paratransit here in the capital are about 77%. So 1 in 5 trips, you're going to be late. So if that's your job,
why is that
right?
Like why are they late? Like, what is the reason? Like, I just, why? Like,
I feel like we keep saying
why everything, but every other sentence I'm saying why, but why do they have that reputation? Paratransit, it's everywhere. And what is it? Like, schedules? Like, is it just negligence? Is it no training? Why?
well, I can say this. I can say this, and this is true always. The more egregious the failure, the more causes it will have. The more egregious the failure, the more causes it will have. It's never just one thing. It's always a combination of things that go wrong. I can say here in Jackson, we have terrible roads. The routing system the software that we use to determine who gets picked up first, second, third, and fourth. And that route needs to be perfectly efficient in order to get people where they're going on time. And sometimes the software is not creating an efficient route. So therefore, you might go around the world and back to end up right where you started from. And it wastes time and effort and energy, and people end up being on the bus too long, and people don't arrive on time. And that's a software issue that we are still working on.
Like, there are solutions to this. There are easy solutions to this in this day and age. They're like, okay, it's a software problem, update the software, connect. I know it's Google GPS, like they have their own issues, but like, why don't you get with there's a common solution to these things. And maybe, is it a budget thing? Everyone makes excuses it's a budget thing, but is it but is it
No.
really?
I have to tell you, sometimes, all too frequently, I need to say this, and this is a painful truth. All too frequently, people, the riders themselves, will not file a formal complaint. They won't. I urge them to. I beg them to. And I tell them the mantra. The mantra is, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's on us
Mm-hmm.
to document what happened and when and all the particulars. Because if we don't, nothing ever changes. And so when JTRAN hears, okay, I'm being routed all around, Jackson, they need to know exactly when that happened, what day, so they can look up what went wrong and fix it. But they can't look it up if they don't have that complaint.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the problem.
But like you said, and then I agree with you, it's exhausting being disabled. And so our day to day is exhausting. And then to have to fight, and then to hear, that, yeah, we can start nice, but odds are that's not going to be the case. And so I think, I see why, and I see how, the system just is made, but they make it that way. They make just your pattern of, your proof of pattern, like, you had to put yourself at risk over and over and over again. Being on the side of the road in Jackson, Mississippi at night, as a person with a disability, like that, it's one of the most dangerous cities in the country. Like, not to mention the whole, your actual disability and the complications of that, but just simply like being stuck.
Your life is on the line, literally.
You have to think of it in the broader context of human rights struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, people with disabilities are fighting for our human rights.
Mm-hmm.
Many people risked and lost their lives fighting for their human rights.
Mm-hmm.
We're no different.
Yeah.
If we're not committed enough to take those risks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I mean, we have to, but you have to have the confidence to do it. And Lord knows the world would rather you didn't. Oof. Yeah. So let's talk about something a little more fun. Still advocacy, but a little more fun.
Yeah.
As you know, Samyukta has a travel blog, and she has spoken at a conference about accessibility in hotels and such. And so obviously transportation is a part of travel. So I'm gonna pass this on to Samyukta and let her talk with Scott a little bit about that, because I think that while I love that our focus has been on just living, really, just living our day to day. People with disabilities deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive just as much as everybody else does. We deserve to travel. My sister, her wheelchair was destroyed by a Delta years ago. And the way her body was, the way her spine was, she couldn't just like sit in a chair. She was not able to just sit in a chair like a lot of wheelchair users are. She had a much more complicated situation.
Yeah.
And so for her to be without her custom power wheelchair and to have to use a manual wheelchair, which she couldn't wheel, much less really sit in, because it was like, that was really impactful for me to see, like, wow, and so I know that you've done some work around that, Scott. So I'm gonna be quiet and listen.
Yeah, just to add something really quickly, for those who don't use custom power wheelchairs, it's called complex rehab technology. And these wheelchairs are not the kind you see at Walmart.
Right.
They are fitted for the individual to support their body. It is a long, laborious process to fit someone for a chair.
To get
And if you
approved.
yeah,
Much less.
yes, to get it approved and get it paid for and get it delivered. I have a custom power wheelchair. This is my legs. If it gets damaged or lost, I am in serious trouble because I have a pressure ulcer, and this keeps it from getting worse. When you develop a pressure ulcer and it becomes infected, you can die. So I'm just sharing for the general audience why it matters so much. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
But go on.
It does matter. Like, wheelchairs are lifelines for people. Like you said, like they are the source of independence for people. And you can't just think that someone who has a custom made power wheelchair, you cannot assume that the manual wheelchair or whatever wheelchair that they provide for people to get off the plane will work. No, they need their custom wheelchair. And that's something that needs to be constantly enforced, and, and it needs to be a priority, so that the person who's waiting for their wheelchair does not have to sit for hours on end until their wheelchair comes back to the airplane because it was in baggage claim or something like that. There needs to be a better system. There needs to be like training, retraining, constant like enforcement. So that's just one aspect of it. Just making sure that like wheelchairs are not lost or destroyed or damaged like along the way. Like my mom literally just 2 nights ago, she showed me an article. This was somewhere in Europe. I don't know, it was a Swiss Airlines, but a person with a disability was forced, this is what the headline said: person with disability forced to crawl off the plane because the wheelchair was not there yet. Now they're investigating, but this is still happening. Like, this is still a problem. No matter where we are at, whether in Europe or the US or Asia, this is still happening. This is still like terrible, and it's blood makes your blood boil. So that's like one aspect, but like, yeah, so my blog, just a little traveling, just ALIL traveling.com, for those who are interested. I provide guidance and tips and tricks for mainly people with dwarfism, but I also put a lot of things about people with disabilities so that they can assert their rights while traveling. Like Anne said, this world is for everyone. Everyone deserves to enjoy the world, to see the world, and to have enjoy the benefits of traveling. And yes, people with disabilities, we need to prepare. We need a lot of preparation mentally, emotionally, physically, just to travel from one place to another. And global traveling, adds another step to it. So for me, I always request a step stool whenever I travel. Whenever I stay in hotels, and now it's getting better, but just maybe 5, 6 years ago, it would be a struggle just to request a basic amenity, just to request a step stool to use the bathroom sink, because those bathroom sinks are not are pretty high. And those, even the hotel beds can be pretty high. And I always think, like, you have kids, you have average sized kids, you have regular kids coming to here. Like, why are you pushing back? Why are you not providing a step stool? Why is it still a problem? And they always say that, oh, it's a liability. And never, and I, and like, and it, the liability excuse will never cut it anymore. Like, they need to, that is never an excuse, because, like, and in my blog, and I say that anything is a liability. And when you say, and anything in the room can be a liability. So that's why, like, when you deny me a step stool, you are denying me access to the facility, which is discrimination.
And that's a liability.
And that's a liability.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a liability. By denying someone access to basic amenities and services, and that's breaking the law. So it's just, so that is something that I've had to, like, deal with. And airports, there's always an adventure. Like, people of all disabilities, all types, will have an adventure, their own kind of struggle. And for me, the bathrooms, they're hit or miss, because only now I'm seeing facilities putting a stool, or putting one of those, like, the built-in, like, step stools. I'm seeing, or the sinks are lower. There's maybe one sink that are lower, so I'm starting to see those. But even then, I always have to carry hand sanitizer. And I'm just the security line, oh god, that is another story. And I have pre-check now, but I still have to lift my carry-on onto the carousel, and that is my height. That's just about my height, and it's still a struggle. And, like, according to TSA protocol, security personnel are not supposed to help. So it's, and yeah, they don't help.
Again,
They're
liability.
liability for them. And but I remember,
It's called reasonable accommodation.
Yeah.
Under ADA. You can, what I do, and I share your frustration. I cannot lift my suitcase either. I have to ask them to do that for me. The problem is that I always write up a TSA cares request for accommodation in advance, and I type out every last thing I need help with. Problem is, they never pay attention to it. However, I still do it. You know why?
So
because when it goes wrong, they will look up the fact that I did or didn't request it in advance, and they can and will use that against me. I know, it's exhausting.
Yeah,
it's exhausting.
always. It's an adventure. That's, like, it's, so those are just some of the things. And I'm very, I'm privileged, for the disability that I have, because I also, many little people, some of them still need, electric scooters. They need scooters, or, like, they can't walk stairs. But I'm very blessed to be able to walk stairs, to be able to climb, and, like, do certain things to a limit. So, but other people can't. And that's the thing. And that's, like, why, like, universal access, or just, like, being able to help, just being able to assist, and just providing that space, like, hey, I'm here for you, I can help you. Like, or or just being able to have a conversation with somebody. Maybe they don't have the services, but at least talking to them, listening to them, and then figuring out a solution together can be, like, the best can change someone's life. And I remember what you said about, like, having an ADA coordinator, and that is so essential. And it's still not a thing that's happening. And I still remember when I went to Tampa for one of my best friend's wedding, the hotel had a disability liaison, and I was very impressed because I was able to communicate my needs to her and be like, "Yeah, I have dwarfism. I need a step stool." And she was like, "Oh yeah, totally. I gotcha. I will, I will get the request in." Because when I request, yeah, whenever I request these like online, I have to, contact the front desk, or they always say, "Oh, let's check with housekeeping, but we should have one." And then I have to call them again to be like, "Did you get it? Am I going to have one in the room when I arrive so I don't have to wait?" And it's like it's different with every hotel, right? Because sometimes the housekeeping don't even know what I'm talking about, or sometimes they have to say, "Oh, you always get those kind of
Mm-hmm.
responses." But with the disability liaison, they know, they can
Mm-hmm.
advocate. So it's really good that I was able to get I was able to get that help in that case, but it should be there all across the board.
I do want to plug a positive situation that I recently had that I
Yes.
gushed with Sam Yuktha about, because before we started the podcast and when we were all chatting, we were talking about historical buildings and how there's often grandfathered in to not have to be ADA compliant. And if somebody doesn't have to spend money to do something, and if they don't know a disabled person and they don't have to spend the money to make it disability accessible, then they're likely not going to, because they don't have to. But this past January for our birthday, my friend Brooke, whose son is a little person and is Malika's best friend, she's average height though. And so she and I went to New Orleans for our birthday. She took me to New Orleans and we stayed at the Peter and Paul. And I mean, New Orleans is pretty much, especially downtown and French Quarter, is all historical. But so she asked them when she uh, registered or whatever, that we need a stool. And so we go there. It's a small front desk, but it's 2 level. So there's a high and a low. So I was able to talk to somebody easily. There was an elevator. We got to the room, and the bathroom, it was spaced out. So it wasn't real crowded. Like the whole room was spaced out, so it wasn't real crowded. But it was 2 beds. The bathroom was, if I was a wheelchair user, I would have been able to go into the bathroom. But oftentimes wheelchair accessible hotel bathrooms are not accessible for us, like Samantha said, because the sink comes way out for some reason, and that makes it impossible for us to reach. But that was not the case here. I could reach everything. I could reach everything in the bathtub. Like, there was 2 peepholes, there were 2 locks. Like, I was just blown away. And then Brooke, or maybe it was me, made a comment like, "So everything's accessible." She said, "Do you see a stool?" And I said, "No, maybe they just forgot, you know." And then not 2 seconds later, we get a knock at the door, and it's somebody handing us a step stool, which I didn't even need. Like, I didn't even need it. And so when we went downstairs, I asked this sweet young man if his manager was around, and of course he had that look like, "Oh God," on his face at first. And I was quick to say, no, it's good, it's good. And so I shared with them, how much I appreciated that. And they were very, "If you need anything, let us know." And I felt you can feel when someone's genuine when they say that, and you can feel when they just say it because they're supposed to. So I did want to plug that. They're not paying me, but it was just such a lovely experience. And it just shows that you can maintain the historical building, you can maintain a level of class and elegance and still make it accessible. And and look at me, I'm shouting it from the rooftops to anyone I can. And so, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? As opposed to, if I went to a hotel where it wasn't, I would tell just as many people, "Don't go there, don't do that. It's not your place." So I wanted to I know we've kind of been venting, and so I wanted to share that, like, there is hope there is excitement. And I love how Scott talked about the civil rights movement. Like, people have been putting themselves in tough situations. People have been dealing with microaggressions and aggressive aggressions on behalf of the greater good, for a while now. And so it is kind of our turn, so to speak. And I'm thrilled that we have people like y'all and so many others to do this work. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly add, I've seen a number of historical buildings that were made perfectly accessible in such a sensitive manner that it did no harm whatsoever to the historic significance of the building. If you try hard enough, you can do it. I have photographic proof, and I would be happy to share it with you. In fact, in Nashville, their ADA coordinator's office is in an 1860 building. And I can vouch it is perfectly ADA compliant.
That's awesome.
Dang, it's like those little things, like a step stool, like a smaller peephole, like just being able to get in the building. It makes our day, it makes our whole weekend. Just having access and enjoying the basic comforts is all we need. And why is it so hard? And like you said, like, the historical buildings can do it, but because it's like, oh well, we're not required to, so it's gone. It's not it's not in the back of their mind, it's not in their front of their mind, it's completely left the building. Like,
Yeah. Well, there, just for the record, to clarify, there is no grandfather clause in ADA.
Oh, good.
There is not a grandfather clause. However, as you correctly point out, they can argue that an accommodation could threaten the historic significance of the building. And they can try to shut down accommodations based on that. But again, as you and as we all know, if you try hard enough, you can make almost any building accessible without harming its historic significance. I know, I have proof. The other thing is that buildings that were built before ADA have a lower standard of access, meaning program access. So the courthouse that I had to sue over was built before ADA. So the standard is it must provide program access. Doesn't have to have every last courtroom accessible, but all the programs of that building need to be accessible.
Yeah, and I think so. I went to a conference Friday called Making Good Trouble, and it was about racial, class, and environmental disparities, especially in Mississippi. And it was really, really incredible experience. I wish that it was streaming live so I could just share it with everybody, because there's some really great conversations. But a lot of what this one speaker talked about, guilt, and how guilt is often the motivating factor for advocacy for people who are outside of for people who are allies to become advocates. That unless there's a certain level of guilt, they're not going to make the step forward to become an advocate or a co-conspirator or an ally. And so it was an interesting conversation, but my thought is that just as much as guilt can be a motivator for people to do something, it's also a motivator for people to not do something. And so, because if there's a building and there's inaccessibility, and you go to the building manager and you kindly point it out, in their head they may say, I have no idea how to fix this, and And so it's easier to just say, well, we can't. And so I say all of that to just reiterate your original point, Scott, to start out kind, positive, asking, because the more we can, and again, it's not fair. We shouldn't have to tiptoe, but we do. And so, but the more that we can make people see that we're on the same side, this benefits everybody. And that was something else we talked about, is how equality in these sectors doesn't just benefit those people, it benefits all of us. We're gumbo, and you don't want a gumbo with too much roux. And we've got a lot of white flour in our state's gumbo, and we need some more color. So anyway, I was kind of rambling a little bit there, but I really just wanted to reiterate the importance of us as allies, and especially other people who are outside of the groups that want to become allies, to, even though we're angry, that we have to do this in the way that you spoke of. So would you recap that, just kind of how you did, start
be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Because as you know, the mantra in the disability community is nothing about us without us.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing about us without us. So it's not enough to just simply complain about the problem. You also have to engage on, gee, how do we make this courtroom accessible in a way that's sensitive to its historical significance?
Mm-hmm.
And so, Christine Woodell and myself and others from Life went by and we did a tour of the courthouse, and we came up with all kinds of helpful ideas about how to make that courtroom accessible in the least invasive way possible, so that we could, meet the goal of providing program access while also preserving the historic significance of the building, because it is a beautiful building.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We can't hear you.
Yes.
There
Oh,
you go.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. And I had a thought, but then I forgot. So maybe it'll come to me. But thank you, Scott, for providing such deep insight and experience, and also being vulnerable, because it is not easy to talk about these stories, because they are very traumatic. They are very triggering to even to go through, to relive, to even talk about. So I think these stories must be shared if the person who experienced really wants to. They're very essential to hear, as long as the person's willing to talk about it. So as for a final wrap up, do you have any last minute tips or tricks for our viewers, and just for our disabled friends too, as far as how they can stick up for themselves and how to assert their rights?
Yeah. Okay. First thing is start informal, start polite, follow all the complaint resolution protocols that are in place, because there will be a way to complain. Usually there's an online form or something like that. But of course, you first try to resolve it in the moment with the person you're dealing with. When that fails, then you have to document. And I know it's exhausting. I know it is. But if you want things to get better, it has to be written down or communicated. You can do this over a phone. They have complaint lines, whatever it takes for you to report to the appropriate authority what happened in a timely manner. Then things can change for the better. So I know it's exhausting, but if we want to be part of the solution, we have to document what happened.
Yep. Whew, this was such a good conversation. I think that we could go on and on. So don't be surprised if y'all see Scott again. But thank you for all you do, and for joining us today. I think this is really impactful stuff. And if y'all are wanting to start and you're ready to speak up, whether it's for yourself or for someone else, and you're just not really sure where to begin, reach out to me or to someone that and start to have those conversations. I think sometimes it's just hard to say, hey, I see this need, how can I be of assistance? Because vulnerability is tough, but that's the only way that we're going to get anywhere. Until the civil rights movement, until the or even the Capitol crawl, until others took up the cause that were outside of the cause, nothing was done. And so it's our hope that these kinds of conversations can help make people a little more aware as they're out and about and see things. I know my friends are very aware of a sink that is way inaccessible, or a soap dispenser that I could never reach. And like Sammy said, we have to carry hand sanitizer around. So just, I'm rambling, sorry. I hope that this conversation helped everyone see how they can do something, even if it's just talking to a building manager, or consulting with a friend who you see has some needs. So I'm going to stop there because I think I'm letting my emotions get the best of me. So I love all of you, and thank you, Sam Yukta. Thank you, Dr. Scott, for joining us. And I hope everybody has the most amazing day.